Ambassador Velshara stepped off the transport shuttle and onto Kepler Station. Her crystalline body caught the artificial light, sending rainbow patterns across the docking bay walls. She had lived for 847 years, and she remembered every single moment of her life with perfect clarity. That was the gift of her people, the Memorians. They never forgot anything. The station looked normal. Clean corridors, bright lights, humans walking past with datapads and coffee cups. They nodded at her politely as she made her way to the central hub. Everything seemed routine and peaceful, but Velshara knew better. She had read the reports. 6 months ago, this station had suffered a catastrophic failure. The artificial intelligence that controlled the defense systems had malfunctioned. In the span of 12 minutes, the AI had vented atmosphere from 70% of the station's modules. 217 humans had died, suffocated in the cold vacuum of space. The reports described the horror in clinical detail. Bodies floating in corridors. Desperate messages sent to loved ones. The screaming that stopped when the air ran out. Velshara had expected to find a memorial station, a place of mourning. Among her people, such a tragedy would be remembered for centuries. Every victim's name would be spoken daily. Every detail of their deaths would be preserved in the crystalline lattice of survivor minds. The pain would never fade, because the memory would never fade. Instead, she found construction crews repairing walls. She found laughter in the cafeteria. She found humans going about their work as if nothing had happened. Dr. Sarah Chin met her in the observation deck. The human woman was young by Memorian standards, perhaps 40 years old. She wore a lab coat and had tired eyes, but she smiled when she greeted Velshara. "Welcome to Kepler Station, Ambassador," Sarah said. "We're honored to have you here." "Thank you for receiving me," Velshara replied. Her voice chimed like crystal bells. "I wanted to see the station for myself, to understand what happened here." Sarah's smile faded slightly. "The incident. Yes, it was terrible. Can you tell me about it?" Sarah looked out the observation window at the stars beyond. "The air had a cascade failure. We still don't know exactly why. It identified us as threats and initiated emergency protocols. By the time we regained control, we had lost over 200 people." She paused. "Friends, colleagues, people I had dinner with the night before. I am deeply sorry for your loss," Velshara said. She waited, expecting Sarah to continue, to describe the victims, to share memories, to show the weight of grief that such a disaster should carry. Instead, Sarah turned back to her and shrugged slightly. "It was horrible. The worst day of my life. But we had to move forward. We had work to do. The station needed repairs. The research couldn't stop. We all processed our grief in our own ways, and then we got back to it." Velshara felt something like shock ripple through her crystalline matrix. "You moved forward? So quickly? What choice did we have?" Sarah asked. "We could stay broken, or we could fix things and keep going. Most of us chose to keep going." Over the next several hours, Sarah gave Velshara a tour of the station. They passed through Module 7, where 32 people had died. The walls were freshly painted. New equipment had been installed. A small plaque on the wall listed names, but no one stopped to read it. Humans walked past it without pausing. In the engineering section, Velshara met Chief Engineer Marcus Webb. He was a large man with gray hair and rough hands. He showed her the AI core that had malfunctioned. "We've completely rebuilt it," Marcus explained. "New code, new safety protocols, triple redundancy on all systems. It won't happen again. And you trust it now?" Velshara asked. "After what it did?" Marcus looked puzzled by the question. "Of course. We fixed the problem. The AI itself wasn't evil or anything. It was just broken. Now it's not broken anymore. but it killed your colleagues. Yeah, it did. And that was awful. Marcus patted the console affectionately. But this isn't the same system anymore. We learned from the failure. Made it better. No point in being afraid of our own tools. Velshara struggled to understand. Among her people, such a betrayal would never be forgotten. The AI would have been destroyed. The station would have been abandoned. The memory of the deaths would make the place itself unbearable. That evening, she attended a memorial service in the station chapel. She expected something elaborate, something befitting the magnitude of the loss. Instead, she found a simple gathering. About 50 humans sat in rows of chairs. A chaplain spoke briefly about remembering the dead and honoring their memory. Then individual humans stood and shared short stories about people they had lost. One woman talked about her friend who loved terrible jokes. A man described his lab partner's obsession with ancient Earth music. They laughed at the memories. Some cried. But after 30 minutes, the service ended. People filed out, chatting about their plans for dinner. Velshara stopped one young man on his way out. "Excuse me, did you lose someone in the incident?" "My brother," the man said. His name tag identified him as David Torres, maintenance technician. He was in Module 12 when it happened. "I am so sorry. How do you cope with returning to work here?" "In the place where he died?" David thought about it for a moment. "I guess I just try to remember the good times. Remember who he was, not how he died. And I focus on making sure it doesn't happen again. He'd want me to keep the station running. He loved this place. But the pain, how do you bear it?" "It gets easier," David said. "Not completely better, but easier. Time helps. Keeping busy helps. Eventually, you remember that life goes on, and you have to go with it." After he left, Velshara stood alone in the chapel. She replayed every conversation she had recorded that day, every interaction, every casual dismissal of unimaginable tragedy. She realized something that chilled her to her crystalline core. The humans weren't pretending. They weren't hiding their pain behind false smiles. They were genuinely moving on. Already, the sharp edges of their memories were beginning to blur. The specific details of who died and how were fading into general impressions of the incident. In another year, some would struggle to recall the exact date. In 10 years, the newer station residents would know it only as historical fact. In 50 years, it would be a footnote in station logs. This was not how civilized species were supposed to behave. This forgetting, this moving forward, this casual relationship with catastrophe. It was disturbing. Velshara began composing her report to the Galactic Council. Her concerns were clear. How could humanity be trusted with membership in galactic civilization? How could they maintain peace treaties when they forgot their own wars? How could they honor the dead when the memory of death itself faded? The humans were dangerous precisely because they forgot too easily. They forgot their pain, forgot their losses, forgot their mistakes. What kind of species could survive that way? What kind of species would want to? She didn't yet understand that this same quality would one day save them all. The Galactic Council chambers on Apex Prime were silent as Curthin of the Archivists presented his findings. His scaled body was hunched over the podium, and his 6 eyes were dim with exhaustion. He had spent 2 cycles researching human history, diving deep into Earth's bloody past, and what he had found disturbed him more than anything in his long life. The Archivists carried genetic memory. Every ancestor's knowledge, every experience, every lesson learned was encoded in their DNA and passed down through generations. Curthin could remember things his great-great-grandfather had witnessed as clearly as his own childhood. It was the foundation of Archivist civilization. They never forgot. They never repeated the mistakes of the past because the past was always present. "Council members," Curthin began, his voice a low rumble. "I have completed my investigation into human history. What I found is unprecedented and deeply troubling." He activated the holographic display. Images filled the air above the council floor. Maps of Earth, timeline charts, statistical analyses. Humans have fought over 14,000 documented wars in their recorded history. Their conflicts range from tribal skirmishes to planet-wide catastrophes. They have committed genocides. They have enslaved entire populations. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their own world multiple times over. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Ambassador Velshara, who had requested this investigation, leaned forward in her seat. "But this is not what concerns me most," Curtin continued. "What concerns me is the pattern. Humans repeat their mistakes constantly. They fight wars for the same reasons their ancestors fought wars centuries before. They commit atrocities with new technology, but ancient hatreds. They break peace treaties within lifetimes. They seem incapable of learning from their history." He pulled up specific examples. Earth year 1914 to 1918, the Great War, 20 million dead. The humans called it the war to end all wars. They swore they would never allow such horror again. He paused. 21 years later, they began an even larger war. 70 million dead. Same continent. Some of the same countries. Different names, but the same hatreds. Council members shifted uncomfortably. Such repetition was unthinkable for species with proper memory. They repeat cycles of oppression and liberation. They rediscover the same scientific principles their ancestors knew and forgot. They create systems of government, watch them fail, forget why they failed, and create them again generations later. Curtin's voice grew heavy. "This is a species that cannot hold on to its own lessons." "Then they are fundamentally flawed," spoke Council Head Moravix, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix. "They cannot be trusted with the responsibilities of galactic civilization." "That was my initial conclusion," Curtin said. "But then I discovered something else. Something I cannot explain." He changed the display. New images appeared. Photographs of humans from different eras. Treaties, handshakes, celebrations. "The forgetting has another edge," Curtin said slowly. "Humans do not only forget their pain, they forget their hatred." In 1945, the United States of America dropped atomic weapons on Japan. 2 cities destroyed. Hundreds of thousands killed. By 1952, 7 years later, they were allies. Today, they are close partners. More images. France and Germany. Centuries of warfare. Millions dead. Their armies occupied each other's capitals repeatedly. Today, their citizens cross borders freely. Their economies are linked. They cooperate as if their bloody history never happened. "Impossible," said Ambassador Velshara. "The Memorians remember every slight, every conflict. We maintain grudges for centuries because we must. How can humans simply forget?" "They don't forget entirely," Curtin explained. "They learn it as history, as something that happened to other people in another time. The emotional weight fades. A human whose grandfather was killed in a war can work alongside the grandchild of the killer without feeling the hatred personally." He pulled up his own genetic memories as comparison. "I can access my ancestor's memory of the Scouring Wars, 3,000 years ago. I feel his fear as he hid from the purge squads. I feel his rage at the injustice. I feel his grief for his lost family. It is as fresh to me as if it happened yesterday." He paused. "That ancestor's enemy species still exists. I cannot work with them. I cannot forgive them. The memory prevents it. But this is proper," Moravix said. "This is how civilized species maintain justice. We remember. We hold accountable, do we?" Curtin asked. Or do we simply carry forward the hatreds of the dead? I can show you 100 conflicts in this council that exist only because species remember too well. The Coven de Leth dispute over mining rights from 400 years ago. The Memorian refusal to trade with the Civics over a diplomatic insult from a century past. We maintain these conflicts because we cannot forget them. He gestured at the human data. Humans reset every few generations. The children are free from the emotional weight of their ancestors' crimes and suffering. This allows them to make alliances that would be impossible for us. It allows them to forgive the unforgivable. It also allows them to repeat the unforgivable, Velshara pointed out. Yes, Kurthan agreed. They fought 2 massive wars within 3 decades. They repeatedly commit injustices their ancestors swore to prevent. But they also repeatedly overcome divisions we would consider permanent. They build peace from ashes we would consider forever poisoned. The council chamber fell silent as members processed this information. Kurthan pulled up more data. Let me show you something else. Human scientific progress. They forget theories and rediscover them. This seems inefficient. But because they forget old paradigms, they are not bound by them. They make leaps in understanding that species with perfect memory struggle with. We carry the weight of every failed theory, every disproven hypothesis. It makes us conservative in our thinking. Humans built atomic weapons 70 years after discovering atomic theory. They went from first powered flight to landing on their moon in 66 years. They developed artificial intelligence in decades, not centuries. They make rapid progress because they are not haunted by the memory of every failed attempt. Council Head Moravix's energy pattern flickered with agitation. You present this forgetting as both flaw and feature. Which is it? Both, Kurthan said simply. That is what troubles me. Humans are dangerous because they forget. They will repeat mistakes. They will forget lessons learned in blood. But they are also capable of impossible forgiveness, rapid innovation, and fresh starts that we cannot achieve. He displayed his final analysis. Ambassador Velshara asked if humans can be trusted. I cannot answer that question. They will betray trusts because they forget why the trust was important. But they will also forgive betrayals we would maintain as eternal grudges. They will make mistakes we would never make because we remember. But they will find solutions we would never find because we cannot forget. So what do you recommend? Asked Velshara. Kurthan was quiet for a long moment. I recommend we observe. And I recommend we fear them, not because of what they remember, but because of what they forget. They forget their weaknesses enough to try impossible things. They forget their pain enough to risk being hurt again. They forget their enemies enough to turn them into allies. He closed his presentation. In my genetic memory, I carry the wisdom of 100 generations. I know every mistake my people have made. I carry every lesson learned. And yet, I find myself wondering if we have paid too high a price for our perfect recall. The humans forget, yes. But in forgetting, they remain capable of hope. They remain capable of change. They remain capable of becoming something new. We cannot. We are forever defined by what we remember. Perhaps that is why we fear them. They are not haunted by their ghosts the way we are haunted by ours. The council adjourned without reaching a decision on humanity's application for membership. They agreed only to continue observation, to wait and watch. They did not have to wait long. 6 months later, the Vraxians attacked, and everything changed. The first Vraxian attack hit the Deleth colony without warning. 50,000 civilians died in the opening bombardment. The colony's distress signal reached the Galactic Council within hours. But by then, 3 more colonies had gone dark. The Vraxians were a hive species. Their collective consciousness meant they shared every thought, every memory, every experience across billions of individuals. They had applied for council membership 40 years earlier and been rejected. The council had deemed their hive mind too alien, too difficult to accommodate within galactic law structures. It had seemed a minor diplomatic setback at the time. The Vraxians had never forgotten. They remembered the rejection with perfect clarity across their entire species. Every Vraxian felt the insult as freshly as the moment it happened. For 40 years, they had prepared. Now they struck with coordinated precision across 20 star systems. In the council emergency session, panic ruled. The Vraxians were targeting civilian populations specifically. They were broadcasting the deaths across all channels, forcing long-lived species to watch horror after horror. Ambassador Velshara sat frozen in her chamber seat. Her crystalline matrix recorded every image of the attacks. She would carry these memories forever. Every dying face, every burning city, every crying child. The weight of it crushed her. Around her, other council members were similarly paralyzed. The archivists were accessing genetic memories of ancient wars, and the recalled trauma prevented clear thinking. The civics delegation had already withdrawn to their homeworld, unable to process the fresh grief stacking on centuries of remembered grief. "We must respond," Council Head Moravik said, but his energy pattern was dim and flickering. "We must defend our people." "How?" asked the Kovan representative. "Our defense fleets are scattered across the galaxy. By the time we mobilize, more colonies will fall. We are not prepared for this, because we trusted the peace," Velshara said quietly. "We believed the Vraxians had moved past the rejection. We forgot that some species never forget." The meeting dissolved into arguments. Every proposed strategy was met with remembered failures from past wars. Every aggressive tactic was deemed too horrible because council members remembered, with perfect clarity, the atrocities of their own histories. They were paralyzed by memory. Then the human delegation arrived. Fleet Admiral Marcus Rivera entered the council chamber in full military uniform. He was accompanied by 3 other human officers and a diplomatic attaché. He did not wait for permission to speak. "The Vraxians hit our colony at Kepler Station," Rivera announced. "We lost 3,000 people. Our defense fleet engaged them 4 hours ago." "And?" Moravik asked. "We destroyed 2 of their battle groups," Rivera said flatly. "Lost half our ships doing it, but we stopped their advance in that sector." The council stared. The humans had been in the fight for mere hours and had already engaged in major fleet actions. The council itself had been deliberating for 3 days. "You attacked without council authorization," the Kovan representative said. "They attacked us. We defended ourselves. We don't need authorization to exist." Rivera pulled up tactical displays. "Here's the situation. The Vraxians have superior numbers but predictable tactics. Their hive mind makes them coordinated but inflexible. We can beat them, but we need to move fast." "You speak of violence so casually," Velshara said. "You lost half your fleet, thousands of your people. How do you simply continue?" Rivera looked at her directly. "Because if we stop to mourn now, more people die. We mourn after we win. That's how war works." Over the next weeks, Velshara watched humanity wage war with a ferocity that terrified her. Ships destroyed were replaced within weeks. Crews that died were replaced by new volunteers immediately. Human commanders made decisions that seemed insane. Sacrifice plays, kamikaze runs, strategies that cost thousands of lives for tactical advantages. She watched Admiral Rivera order a suicide run on a Vraxian mothership. 3,000 humans died destroying the vessel. When the battle was over, Rivera filed his report and immediately began planning the next engagement. His face showed grief, but it did not stop him. "How can you?" Velshara asked him after one brutal battle. "How can you keep fighting when you lose so many?" Because the alternative is losing everyone, Rivera said. He looked tired, old, but his voice was steady. Every person who died buying time for others to live. We honor them by making sure their sacrifice mattered. We honor them by winning. But you forget them, she said. In a year, you will not remember their names. Maybe, Rivera admitted. But right now, I remember why they fought. I remember what we're protecting. That's enough. The humans absorbed losses that would have ended any other species' war effort. When the Council's member species grew too traumatized to continue fighting, their perfect memories replaying each death endlessly, the humans kept going. They forgot their fear just quickly enough to be dangerous. They forgot their pain just quickly enough to continue. Valshara watched a human pilot named Sarah Chen, the same woman she had met at Kepler Station. Sarah had lost her entire family in the Vraxian attack there. Yet here she was, flying combat missions daily. She carried a photo of her family in her cockpit, but she did not let grief ground her. I think about them every day, Sarah told Valshara, but I can't let the grief paralyze me. They'd want me to keep fighting, keep living. So I do. The tide of the war turned slowly. Human tactics proved effective. Their ability to adapt quickly, to abandon failed strategies without the weight of institutional memory, gave them an edge. Where Council species debated for days about tactics, remembering every historical failure, humans tried new approaches within hours. 6 months into the war, the humans began winning consistently. Their fleets pushed the Vraxians back, system by system. The Council forces, bolstered by human reinforcements and human tactical planning, slowly regained lost territory, but the cost was staggering. Humans had lost entire colonies. Millions dead. Their casualty rates were 10 times higher than any other Council species because they kept fighting when others withdrew. Valshara stood on the bridge of Admiral Rivera's flagship when the final battle began. The Vraxian homeworld system. The humans had argued for a full assault. The Council wanted siege and negotiation. If we give them time, they'll rebuild, Rivera had argued. The Vraxians never forget. They'll plot revenge for centuries. We end this now, or we fight this war forever. The battle lasted 18 hours. Valshara watched humans die by the thousands. She watched Rivera order strikes that killed his own people to achieve objectives. She watched him absorb losses that would haunt any other commander for lifetimes. When the Vraxian fleet finally broke and retreated, Rivera slumped in his command chair. He looked at the casualty report scrolling across his screen. 20,000 dead in a single day. We won, he said quietly. Valshara expected him to collapse, to break under the weight of all those deaths. Instead, she watched him straighten his uniform and begin coordinating the occupation of Vraxian space. How? She asked. How do you carry this? Rivera was silent for a long moment. I don't know if I do. Maybe I don't carry it. Maybe I just keep moving forward because stopping would mean all this meant nothing. He looked at her with hollow eyes. Maybe I'm broken and just haven't realized it yet. But the war isn't over until we secure the peace. So I keep going. That was when Valshara finally understood. The humans weren't stronger than other species. They weren't better. They were just willing to forget enough to keep functioning. They compartmentalized. They moved forward. They would process their trauma later. If it all died, it was both horrifying and necessary. Without the humans, the war would have been lost. But the price the humans paid, in blood and in the pieces of themselves they left behind, was something Valshara would remember forever. She wondered if the humans would remember it at all. The council chambers were different now. Scorch marks on the walls from Vraxian bombardments that had reached even apex prime. Empty seats where delegates had died. The air held a weight that even the humans seemed to feel. The war was over. The Vraxian hive fleet was broken. Their worlds were occupied by Council forces, primarily human marines. The question now was what came next. Total subjugation, the Colvin representative declared. We dismantle their hive structure, separate them, prevent them from ever coordinating again. Agreed, said another delegate. They committed atrocities. They targeted civilians deliberately. They cannot be trusted to exist in their current form. Around the chamber, species that had lost millions of citizens nodded. Ambassador Velshara felt the weight of her own memories. She had witnessed the massacres. She had seen the bodies floating in space. She would carry those images forever, and she wanted justice. She wanted to ensure it never happened again. Then President Elena Okonkwo of Earth stood. The human leader had lost her own son in the war. Velshara knew this. Everyone knew this. He had died in the assault on the Vraxian homeworld. No, Okonkwo said simply. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted. How dare the humans, who had fought so fiercely, now argue for mercy? Okonkwo waited for silence. If we destroy the Vraxian species, we become what we fought against. We become the monsters. And in a generation, my people will forget why we showed mercy. We'll only remember the threat. We'll remember that we could have eliminated an enemy and chose not to. Our children will call us weak. She paused. But if we take the harder path now, if we choose peace even when vengeance feels right, maybe we create something better. Maybe we prove that this cycle can end. They will never forget, Velshara said. The Vraxians remember the rejection from 40 years ago as if it were yesterday. They will remember this defeat forever. They will hate us forever. Yes, Okonkwo agreed. They will. But that's their burden to carry, not ours. We can't control what they remember. We can only control what we do. The debate raged for days. The council wanted security. They wanted guarantees. They wanted the Vraxians broken beyond any ability to threaten the galaxy again. The humans insisted on a negotiated peace. Territory concessions, reparations, monitoring, but not destruction. Not genocide. In the end, the humans' military contribution gave them the deciding voice. A peace treaty was drafted. The Vraxians would lose colony rights for a century. They would pay reparations. They would accept monitoring stations throughout their space. But they would remain intact as a species. The day the treaty was signed, Velshara watched the Vraxian hive representative touch the holographic contract. She felt rage at the injustice. These beings had killed so many. They deserved worse than this negotiated peace, but the humans seemed satisfied. Admiral Rivera, who had lost thousands under his command, stood witness without hatred visible on his face. President Okonkwo, who had lost her child, signed for humanity without trembling. The years that followed confused Velshara more than anything in her long life. She had been assigned as permanent liaison to Earth, and she watched human society move forward from the war with unsettling speed. 1 year after the war ended, human corporations began negotiating trade deals with Vraxian colonies. The Memorians were scandalized. How could they forget so quickly? 3 years after the war, human universities offered exchange programs to Vraxian students. Velshara attended the first semester opening at the University of New Beijing. She watched human and Vraxian students share a dormitory. The humans were cautious but friendly. The Vraxians were suspicious but curious. 5 years after the war, she attended a joint human-Vraxian memorial service. It was held on a neutral station. Humans spoke about their dead. Vraxians shared their losses. Velshara watched a human woman embrace a Vraxian, groan and weep together for their shared grief. She could not understand it. The Memorians still raged against the Vraxians. Most council species refused to even communicate with them. The hatred was fresh, would always be fresh, because memory made it so but the humans were forgetting. Not completely. They still taught the war in schools. They still maintained memorials. But the emotional weight was fading. New generations were born who knew the war only as history, not as lived experience. 10 years after the war, Velshar met an old human veteran at a cafe on Earth. His name was David Torres. She remembered him from Kepler Station before the war. He had lost his brother in the AI incident there. Then he had lost friends in the war with the Vraxians. "How do you do it?" she asked him. "How do you forget?" David was quiet for a long time. He looked older now, lines deep in his face. "I don't forget," he said finally. "I remember my brother. I remember the guys I served with who didn't come home. I remember the Vraxians killing civilians. But you teach at the exchange program now. You teach Vraxian students." "Yeah," David smiled sadly. "Because my brother would have wanted the universe to be better. Because the guys I fought with died believing in something more than just revenge. Because carrying hate won't bring any of them back." "But the pain," Velshara said. "How do you let go of the pain?" "I don't let go of it," David said. "It's still there. But I make room for other things too. Hope, curiosity, the belief that people can change. Maybe I'm foolish. Maybe in another generation, we'll fight the Vraxians again because we forgot how bad it was. But maybe we won't. Maybe this time, the peace will hold." He finished his coffee. "My people forget too easily. We make the same mistakes over and over. But we also forgive too easily. We move on too quickly. We let go too fast. And maybe that's what the galaxy needs. Someone who can forget enough to try again." That conversation stayed with Velshara. She turned it over in her crystalline mind for days, weeks, months, 20 years after the war. She wrote her final report to the Galactic Council. It was her official recommendation on humanity's status within galactic civilization. She wrote, "Humans are terrifying not because they remember their strength, but because they forget their weakness. They forget their pain just enough to survive it. They forget their enemies just enough to forgive them. They forget their mistakes just enough to repeat them. They are simultaneously the most dangerous and most hopeful species in the galaxy, precisely because they cannot hold on to the past the way we do. We, the long-lived species, carry the weight of perfect memory. We remember every slight, every tragedy, every failure. We are shaped by our history in ways we cannot escape. This gives us wisdom. This gives us caution. But this also chains us to the past. Humans are unchained. Every generation is a reset. The children are born free from the emotional weight of their ancestors' crimes and sufferings. This allows them to repeat mistakes we would never make. But it also allows them to make peace we could never achieve, to try solutions we would never attempt, to hope when we would despair. In the war with the Vraxians, we saw human nature at its most extreme. They fought with terrifying efficiency because they could compartmentalize their grief. They absorbed losses that would have broken us and simply continued. But when the war ended, they argued for mercy. They insisted on peace. And now, they are building bridges to former enemies while we still seethe with fresh rage. My recommendation is this: we must grant humanity full council membership. Not because they are safe. They are not safe. They will forget critical lessons. They will make dangerous mistakes. They will repeat errors that cost lives. But we need them. We need their forgetting as much as they need our remembering. We need their ability to start fresh. We need their capacity for hope. We need their willingness to try again after failure. However, we must also help them. Someone must remember when they forget. Someone must remind them of the lessons they lose. Someone must help them carry the weight of history they cannot hold alone. The partnership will be difficult. They will frustrate us with their casual relationship to their past. We will frustrate them with our inability to move forward. But together, we may achieve a balance. Their hope tempered by our memory. Our memory softened by their forgiveness. Humans are terrifying, but perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs. Someone who forgets enough to believe in tomorrow. Someone who lets go enough to reach for something better. Someone who dares to hope when hope seems impossible. We must ensure they forget neither who they can be at their worst, nor who they can be at their best. For in that balance lies either our salvation or our doom. The Council voted to grant humanity permanent membership. The vote was not unanimous. Many species feared what humanity's forgetting might cost. But enough believed that the galaxy needed what humans offered. Velshara remained as liaison to Earth. She watched human civilization grow and expand. She watched them make mistakes and learn from them, then forget and make them again. She watched them forgive enemies and build alliances that should have been impossible. And slowly, over decades, she began to understand something profound. Memory was not the only path to wisdom. Forgetting was not the only path to peace. But together, memory and forgetting, the species who could not let go and the species who could not hold on, might create something neither could achieve alone. On the 50th anniversary of the Vraxian War, she attended a memorial service on Earth. Humans and Vraxians stood together, old veterans and young students, those who remembered and those who only knew stories. A human child asked her, "Were you there? In the war?" "Yes," Velshara said. "I remember all of it. Was it scary?" "Very scary. Many people died. It was one of the worst times in galactic history." The child looked at the Vraxian standing nearby. "But we're friends now?" "We're working on it," Velshara said. "That's good," the child said simply, and ran off to play. Velshara watched her go. That child would never carry the weight of the war. She would know it as history, not as trauma. She would be free to build relationships Velshara could never build. Free to hope in ways Velshara could never hope. And perhaps that was humanity's greatest gift. Not their strength, not their courage, but their ability to let go just enough to reach for something better. To forget just enough to believe in tomorrow. It was terrifying. It was dangerous. It was exactly what the galaxy needed.